So the big question is this: how do aspiring real estate investors like us escape from the rat race and build real wealth and freedom without access to millions of dollars in investment capital and start to live the life that we know we deserve? This is the question, and this podcast will give you the answer. My name is Zack Childress, and welcome to Real Estate Investing Talk Show.
I do want to talk about creative financing today and why creative financing is one of those things that a lot of people steer away from, but you shouldn't, because there's so many different ways to do creative financing with sellers, and there's opportunities out there for you to build cash flow off of properties that you don't even own. And that's the beauty of it. You control the property with paperwork that gives you the ability to rent it out, lease it out, sell it out, whatever you choose. You can do so many different things with creative financing. And so one of those things, if we narrow them down, you've got like a lease option, which is leasing the property with the option to buy it. You've got the sandwich lease option, which is leasing the property with the option to buy it and then turning around and leasing it to a tenant buyer so that they get the option to buy it. And in that aspect, you need a longer term of the lease with the seller than you would give the term to the buyer, the tenant buyer. Now, those of you in Texas, you may not find a lot of benefit with the lease option just because you guys have regulation over there that kind of restricts the amount of time that you can put on a sell of a lease option. And so you might lean more towards like a subject to. And there's nothing wrong with subject twos. I mean, it's just a different way of structuring the deal. So we've talked, lease option is one way to do it. The other way is like a subject to. But a lease option and a subject to both could be taking over payments. I prefer all my lease options to be taking over the payments. It's the same way as if I'm going to do a subject to, I'm going to take over the payments. And so in a subject to, it is what that is. It's a purchase and sales agreement subject to the financing to stay in place and the owner to relinquish title or the deed to the new or to the buyer. So what does that mean? That means if I'm the buyer and I'm coming in on your property, well, I'm doing one right now. The seller lives in Kentucky and she has a property here in Huntsville and she just doesn't want it anymore. She doesn't want to manage it from afar. She doesn't want to deal with it. She just doesn't want to have anything to do with being a landlord. She wants to go into new ventures in her life. So I'm putting a purchase and sales agreement with her together, subject to, meaning that she's going to deed the property to me, whether it be a quick claim deed or anything of that nature. And I'm going to take ownership of the asset, but I won't have ownership of the financing, right? She will still be responsible legally for the financing. I will have control over the asset though. And the way that works is it's subject to the financing, meaning that the financing is going to stay in place if she owes like $32,000 on the property. And I just make a clause in there that just simply says that I am taking over the financing and that my purchase price will be whatever the payoff amount is on the loan at time of close. So if I take it at $32,000 now, and then I'm going to rent it out because her payment's like $280 a month and it rents for $600 a month, I'm just going to take that subject to and turn around and I'm just going to put a renter in it. I'm going to treat it just like a rental property. And then I'm going to take the $300 a month off the property because I didn't have to put any money in the deal, right? It's zero money, it's zero credit, it's a zero loan, it's zero qualifications. What I'm going to do with that deal is I'm going to rent it out. So let's say over the next 10 years, I rent it out, right? So I'm making $36,000 over 10 years on this property. But in 10 years, is she still going to owe $32,000 on the note? No. she might owe $15,000. The property's worth about $50,000. So I'm going to have $35,000 equity built in the property. Plus over 10 years, I'm going to have about $36,000 in cash flow. So this little deal over a 10-year period is going to pay me roughly $70,000 over 10 years, because then I'll end up selling it, taking the equity and moving on to a better investment. See, and that's the good thing about like a subject to, right? Where a lease option, you set the price as is, or you could say in your lease option when it says purchase price, let's say you agreed on a 5-year term with them, 5-year term, you could set purchase price to be the payoff amount of the loan at time of close. So meaning in 5 years, whatever the balance is on the loan is what you would have as a payoff amount or a purchase price. But in some cases in a lease option, you're not really getting that type of flexibility. You're getting, here's, $35,000 or $135,000 is what I want to sell it for, which means the seller gets the reward in 5 years from now when you pay $135 and they may only owe $115. So that's a benefit. So that's always a good thing. Now, the lease option aspect of things is where it's just a lease with an option to purchase. So there is no transfer of ownership. There is no triggering of what people refer to as the due on sell clause in the lease options. One of the reasons I love it so much. Now, move over to the subject to deal. When we change ownership, could legally there be a due on sale clause executed? Yes, absolutely there could. And the main way that gets triggered is when two main ways. When the new ownership, the deed transfer, quitclaim, whatever, is now in a different form of name. And number two, if you try to alter or change the insurance policy, because if you do that, then they notify the lender, and then the lender goes, oh. But there is a way, which is called the St. Germain's Act, which was a federal case that allows us to transfer ownership out of our name into a trust name. And so when we deed a subject to or quitclaim it, we never deed it into our name. We never deed it into our company name. We always set up a trust. So for instance, like the lady I'm working with in Kansas, Kelsey, I would take her last name and I would say her last name Trust, right? Like Kelsey's 123 Main Street Trust. And so therefore it's got the name and the property address on the trust, even though I'm the beneficiary of the trust. But I still want to give her some ownership. So I would give her like 1% ownership in that trust. So therefore she has ownership in the trust. I have majority ownership, but it gives her ownership in the trust. And so that helps you comply with the changing the deed on the property. A lot of people say, yeah, but subject twos, that'll trigger a due on sell clause. Well, it's just because they're not educated enough. If you research the St. Germain's Act, which was a federal case, it basically allows us to now deed properties into a trust for asset protection and estate planning. So you just got to comply with that. And if you comply with that, then you're safe, you're good. You now have ownership in a trust. Now you own the trust. You're the beneficiary of the trust. You could be the trustee. You could have anybody be the trustee. And now you're in control of that property, and now you can rent it out. You could sell it if you wanted to, whatever the choice may be at that point. So that's always good information. So creative financing is obviously one of those things that you just got to make sure you're staying in it, you're learning it, you're being active in the process. There's different paperwork involved from, for instance, like a lease option. I'm going to have to file what's called a memorandum of option to cloud the title so the seller can't sell it out from underneath me. Where in a subject to, they're deeding the property into my trust, which means I own it. They can't sell it. I'm the only one that can sell it. So that gives you protection. Also, you got to think about what's called an authorization to release information. And so, a lot of times banks will take those. They have to be notarized because why? I need to call the bank. I need to find out really what's going on with that mortgage, what's going on with the loan, where do the payments get sent, things like that. If they have an online login to their banking mortgage platform, that's great. because then you can just use that. I've done that with properties in the past where I just go online, make the payments. In a lease option, you get what's called an option consideration fee, which is the fee that allows them to take action to purchase, but that option fee is non-refundable. So you got to have them sign a disclosure that they're aware of that and they know that. There's some other things with lease options that you need to make sure you're working with on the tenant buyer side. On the subject to side, most of the time you could get an authorization to release information, but just to take it one step further, you need to get a limited power of an attorney that just says, hey, look, this power of attorney gives me limitations to communicate on the behalf of this property and the information and how this property is acquired, sold, refinanced, the whole 9 yards. It's a limited power of an attorney specifically to that type of property, which gives you the ability to communicate on the behalf of the seller, to the lender, to a closing attorney, to anybody, because you have that document and it needs to be notarized. Okay, so there's definitely different forms of paperwork that you need to consider when you're moving through that process. On the deal I'm doing locally, I'm just going to get it subject to and rent it out. Some people want to do a subject to and then seller finance it out and maybe do what's called a wrap mortgage. So for instance, let's use Kelsey's deal. She's got a 5.4% interest rate. So if I take it subject to, I could sell it out on a wrap, but I would need to sell it out for more than 5.4 interest rate, right? So I would need to sell it at 9 or 9.5%, make the spread on that, amortize that loan for 15 years so that my payment is larger than her 280. Now people say, well, why would you do that? Well, there's some benefit to that. I can sell it that way, which means I don't have to be a landlord, which means I don't have to fix toilets or trash or broken windows or doors and knobs that don't work. I don't have to deal with any of that. They got to deal with it. The other side of the equation is if I get it for 32 and I sell it for what it is on the market right now, valued at 55, with a 15-year amortized loan, because the payments will be higher, and so I get the cash flow, and the down payment. So what Manny was talking about earlier, the three-way pay on a lease option or a subject to, if I'm selling it out on a wrap from a subject to that came in, I get a down payment, which is upfront money. I get the cash flow every month, and then I get the back end payoff once they close on the deal. Same way on a lease option, I get the option consideration fee on the front, the cash flow throughout it, and I get the payoff in the back when they close. So when you're doing like a subject to and I'm selling it out on a wrap, I also have to take in consideration what's called usury laws, and each state is different. Some states say, look, you can't charge more than 12% interest. Some states say you can't charge more than 10. And a lot of times that's based off of they'll word it like you can't charge more than 6% of the prime rate in the current 3-year or 3-month average. Or 6-month average. And so let's say the prime 6-month average is, 5%. So then if I can't charge more than 10%, then I can charge prime plus 5. And I can get my 10%. So there's a rule of thumb that I know a lot of guys that I network with, they do what's called a 10-10-10 rule. And it's 10% down, 10% interest, and 10-year amortized. The 10-year amortized just means they're going to pay it off in 10 years, but it also means that their payment's going to be a little higher, which creates more cash flow because of a 10-year note. Now, the beauty of selling it out on a wrap or a straight seller financing on the outbound side is that you amortize that loan. So, for instance, a $55,000 purchase now, if it was amortized for 15 years, they would end up paying back somewhere around $80,000 to $90,000 for that property. So there's a huge upswing to that. You know what I mean? So, where if I'm just renting it, well, I could just rent it until I'm making cash flow and then I could sell it one day. Or I could rent it until the mortgage got down to maybe, say, $10,000 on the A to B side where I'm doing the subject to, and then I could just pay off the $10,000. Now I own it free and clear, and then I could just turn around and do a straight seller financing. So if it's owned free and clear and I own it free and clear, I could be creative with it. I could sell it on a straight seller financing. And I could do a 10-10-10. I could do 10% down. So let's say I ride this for 10 years and the property's worth, I don't know, let's just say $65,000. In 10 years from now, and I only owe $10,000 on the mortgage with the original seller, I pay off the $10,000 mortgage. I then turn around to a 10-10-10, or I'd probably do a 10-10-15, something like that. But let's just use 10. That means I'm going to get. Now, I've had it for 10 years, right? I've made $36,000 on the cash flow for 10 years. So let's just write that out. So that's $36,000 on that property for the first 10 years. Now I turn around, I ask for 10% down, which is $6,500, 10% interest rate on this property, amortized, which I could pull that up real quick. Let's see, a mortgage. Let's see what the mortgage is going to be. $65,000. 10% interest, 10-year term. That means the payment on this is going to be $690 a month. So if I take 690 times 12, that's $8,280 a year, but I'm doing it for 10 years times 10 years. That's $82,800. Woo, boy, right? So here's where it gets really good. So I got $6,500 as a down payment. You know what? I forgot to take out the down payment. $6,500. Boom. Oh, wait a minute. $6,500. Why is it not doing that? $6,500 is the down payment. Okay, there we go. So $65,000 mortgage, $6,500 down payment, which means now I'm financing 10% interest, 10-year term. My payment is their payment is going to be $777 a month. Isn't that a beautiful thing? That's a beautiful thing right there. That's a beautiful thing. Now, here you go. That means over 10 years, they will end up paying me back $99,756. Now you see why you sell on seller financing, right? Times 12, that's $9,324 a year. That's a big, big win when you do it that way. So now I just want you to look. This is a 20-year play, okay? This is a 20-year play. Remember, creative financing, the long term is where the money's at. It's not immediate. If you want immediate rewards, wholesale and fix and flip. Long-term play, wealth building is through tier 2 and tier 4. So let's just look at the 20-year play on this deal. Now remember, this is a $32,000 property that I'm picking up, okay? $32,000 property that I'm picking up. Okay. In 10 years from now, on that $32,000 property, I will have made $36,000. Okay. And then a payoff, $10,000 payoff. Okay. Then over the next 10 years that I sell or finance it, I'm going to have a $6,500 down payment plus $99,756 in just payments. Just payments. So here's what I want you to understand. On a $32,000 house, roughly I paid $10,000 for it. Over 20 years, I will have made, you guys are going to love this. I will have made $142,256 on a $32,000 house that I ended up having to pay $10,000. If you remember, at the end of 10 years, pay off the mortgage, right? That I will end up having to pay $10,000 for. So that's why they say stack these deals, right? Because if you're stacking these deals right, you're running yourself into some major profits, major profits. I mean, think about it. $32,000 house that I end up making $142,000 off of. But the point being made is that either way you look at it, you can buy a $32,000 house and in 20 years because I'm renting it for the first 10 and then seller financing it out the second 10, I make $142,000 on that deal. So, that's the beauty. So if you really wanted to break that down, $142,000 divided by, what am I doing here? $142,000 divided by 20 years, that's $7,000 a year divided by 12. That's $600 a month off that property for the next 20 years, right? For the next 20 years. Next 20 years. So, and all because what? I negotiated some form of creative financing with them. So you got to keep that in mind. That's why I love these deals.
You've been listening to the Real Estate Investing Talk Show. I'm Zack Childress, and I'm on a mission to create 10,000 real estate bosses over the next year. Will you be one of them? Head over to my website, reisuccessacademy.com/web class, and register for my free web class where you'll discover how to escape from the 9-to-5 grind and become your own boss in real estate. See you there.